Hey, it's Marcus from Holosuite, helping experimental artists make more, better music. So as I probably mentioned on my channel before, the genre of music that I really specialize in as a mastering engineer is experimental music, and particularly ambient music. And that's because I come from a history of making ambient music myself, and I just know a lot of artists that are in that sphere. So I've really gotten into what makes mastering for ambient different to other genres of music. So today I'd like to talk about what those things are. What do I do differently when I'm mastering ambient to make it sound the best that it can? It's important that when you're getting your ambient music mastered that you trust it with somebody who knows the genre well. So if you are interested in trying out my services, please check the link in the description below to get a free sample. If you send me one song, I will master it for you for free. You can use it as you like, as long as you credit me if you're going to be releasing it. So please check that in the description. And also you'll find links to other resources for ambient artists, including checklists, guides, and templates. So let's start with EQ. When we're mastering ambient, the two things that I generally look out for and that generally give you the most benefit when you're mastering for ambient is scooping out part of the low mids and raising up the highs. We scoop out the low mids a little bit to remove a bit of boominess and add some clarity in that area, because that tends to be where things build up. And the top end is usually to enhance the kind of sparkle, draw out the details, the textures of everything that's happening below, because this area tends to need a little bit more of a boost in the ambient area. Next, we've got compression and limiting. And for ambient music, I generally barely touch these. I generally use the limiter just to bring things up to kind of radio ready levels. I generally don't let it engage unless there's something that's really, really dynamic. But in ambient, we want to keep those dynamics because it's very important to have that juxtaposition between the different parts. We don't want to push them down too much. So generally, when I'm compressing, I usually just gently take off the tiniest bit. And if I do have to use any heavier compression, I tend to do it in the high end, which is usually where the kind of spikiest part of the track is, just to glue together things like field recordings or kind of the sharp end of a synthesizer or some kind of like acoustic instrument, so that it glues it to everything else. Next, we have the stereo image. Now, as I've mentioned in previous videos, stereo image is one of the trickiest parts in ambient music, mostly because ambient music wants to be big. It wants to be very wide and also wants to be very deep. But this can also mean that the middle of the mix tends to get neglected. And it also means that things can enter in what's called the antiphase area, where you will end up with phase cancellation when you go to mono. And one thing I've learned over the years is that bringing things down so that it's mono compatible in the ambient sphere tends to kind of kill the vibe. So I tend to make a call about what the maximum is, where you can still hear the most of it, but we don't want to completely kill the vibe. Eventually you'll probably lose something in ambient because so much is happening on the outside of the mix. And as I've covered before, what I like to do is to try and bring something into the middle, so you get that better sense of kind of comparison to increase the space. Other kinds of processing. In my case, I tend to use a little bit of saturation, and I really like saturation in the upper mids area. Ambient just tends to kind of come alive a bit more when we do that. It increases the clarity. It also gives you a more kind of slightly more in your face sense, so things kind of come forward a little bit. And obviously we want to try and find a balance between making things subtle when they need to be subtle and making things a bit more in your face when they need to be in your face. So I strike a balance there. And finally, I also have to consider the medium. So most of the music that my clients make tends to be released on tape or vinyl or some other analog format. So I need to consider that when I'm working on it. So I tend to make things maybe a little bit brighter than they need to be, because when it comes out on tape or vinyl, it tends to kind of take the sheen off a little bit. So you end up with something that still sounds very clear, but not overbearing. As always, please don't forget to like and subscribe to support this channel. I really appreciate it. Until next time, keep making music. Cheers.